Spiritual growth isn't about a vertical ascent to heaven, but about growth in every dimension at once. It's spirituality in 3D. Growth in spirit doesn't measure one's proximity to a God above, but rather the spaciousness of one's own soul. Its volume, its capacity, its size. We need souls that can take in the world in all its complexity and diversity, yet still maintain our integrity. And we need souls that can love and be in relationship with all of this complexity. Instead of fight or flight, we need a spiritual posture of embrace. This is from the Reverend Rob Hardy's All Souls Church Unitarian in Washington, D.C. Our opening words are number 429 in the back of your hymnal. Come into this place of peace and let its silence heal your spirit. Come into this place of memory and let its history warm your soul. Come into this place of prophecy and power and let its vision change your heart. William Schultz.
Let those who live in every land declare that fear and war are done, joined by the labor of their hands, in love and understanding one.
And our opening hymn, number 159. Our transitional words today are 461. Nothing worth doing is completed in our lifetime.
Therefore, we are saved by hope.
Nothing true or beautiful or good makes complete sense in any immediate context of history.
Therefore, we are saved by faith.
Nothing we do, however virtuous, can be accomplished alone.
Therefore, we are saved by love.
No virtuous act is quite as virtuous from the standpoint of our friend or foe as from our own.
Therefore, we are saved by the final form of love, which is forgiveness.
From Reinhold Niebuhr. I would now like to introduce Reverend Bill Breeden, who will be sharing with us his words of wisdom today.
When I put that sermon title on the sent that sermon title to him, Glenda said, well, if you're going to put that on your sermon title, you ought to wear your WTF shirt. It actually says, where's the fish? But you know, really, WTF. Who would have thought we would be where we are today just a year ago? I mean, we thought it was possible, actually, for about 4 years. But who would have thought we'd be where we are today? On the edge, perhaps, of an actual nuclear exchange. Really. So I want to do two things today. First, I want to start out because I believe that one of the most healing things in the world is humor. And I think we need some humor in these days. I like the things that make me laugh, or at least make me grin. Glenda laughs easier than I do, but some things do make me laugh pretty hard at times. And if you haven't seen McSweeney's Internet Tendency, I encourage you to look it up and become a subscriber, because they give you humor every week. And it's just people sitting around on couches thinking of this stuff and sending it in. Last Tuesday was Fat Tuesday. How many of you celebrated Fat Tuesday? Somebody did. Somebody said they went to a party or something earlier. I didn't grow up celebrating Fat Tuesday. I grew up in the Nazarene church and holiness tradition, and we didn't dance, smoke, or chew, or go out with girls who do. And so we didn't celebrate like that on Fat Tuesday. And I didn't really get to know that tradition until I grew up and went away on my own a little bit. I still don't do much on Fat Tuesday except probably sit at home and read a book, something like that. But evidently people have a big time. I know in Bloomington, Fat Tuesday's a big thing. They have parties all over the town, and it always seemed kind of strange to me when I heard about it, because you take this Tuesday and you do all the things that you're not supposed to do, and then give them up for 3 or 4 weeks of Lent. Try to get all your sinning done in one night, I guess. And I thought that was, it's a bizarre idea, but at the same time, it is a time in which the Christian tradition honors the last weeks of Jesus of Nazareth. I have to say that much of the Christian tradition these days, with Christian nationalism and all the other fascist movements who carry crosses along with American flags. If you remember, I think it was Sinclair Lewis' book, It Can't Happen Here, which is written in the 1920s, that said when fascism comes to America, it will be carrying a cross and wrapped in a flag. And we saw the cross and the flag bursting down the Capitol doors on January 6th. Sinclair Lewis was a prophet. So anyway, I think I like Jesus. I think he's one of my role models. As I think it was Omar Bradley said, we've conquered, we've controlled the atom, and we've gone to the moon, but we have yet to learn the message of the Sermon on the Mount. And I personally think Jesus was one of the wisest teachers in the history of the human race. I think he was a human being. I think he taught his followers to be better human beings. I recently went down to Terre Haute, or to Evansville, to be in a class at the Newman Center at Terre Haute, at Evansville University, with a bunch of college students whose advisor whose sponsor is a Sister of Providence. And I want to tell you, Sisters of Providence are some of my favorite people in the world. These are radical nuns, and I've known them for many years. I remember when St. Francis was named Pope, I met Sister Rita. At that time, she was in her 90s. She's too old now to visit death row anymore, but I used to see her every month on death row at Terre Haute Prison. We would come out of the visiting our people on death row at the same time, and the week after Francis was elected, I was walking with her slowly back to the main gate, and I said, well, what do you think of your new Pope? She said, oh, we love Pope Frankie. And so, that gives you an idea how radical these nuns are, that they can call it Pope Frankie. So I went down there and met with this group and talked about the death penalty and so forth. And in the process, because it was a Catholic group, we talked about Jesus. and I was making a statement that Jesus was a pacifist, and their faculty sponsor was there. It's a man probably in his 50s sitting behind me. He just said, "That's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard." I said, "Really?" He said, "No New Testament scholar would agree with you on that." I said, "Really?" You know, what does put away your sword, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword mean? What does it mean when Jesus said, if someone hits you, turn them the other cheek? Sounds like a pacifist to me, or either that or a schizophrenic. So that's what, kind of strange, it was a strange juxtaposition of trying to deal with this faculty advisor who finally I had to just ask him to please be silent, that I'd driven 2 hours down here to talk to students and I would be glad to talk with him afterwards. And he left. But I want to give you some humor this morning that I found on McSweeney's. It suggests, pretend that Jesus was an adjunct professor or AI. Probably not tenured, because tenured professors don't really care about students' evaluations a whole lot. I mean, some do, because they're still willing to learn, but they don't have to worry about losing their jobs. But the ones who are just there temporarily, students' evaluations may have impact on their lives. So here are some selective negative teaching evaluations of Jesus Christ. Very inconvenient class, the student wrote. Always holds lectures on top of mountains in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, but never close to the main campus. And then one student wrote, by week 1, I was already tired of his anti-rich, pro-Samaritan bullshit. I wanted to take a course in Christianity, not liberalism. Wears sandals too much. No one wants to see your dusty feet. Not what I expected, said one student. They say his area of specialty is carpentry, but we never built anything. Kind of absent-minded. My name's Simon, and he called me Peter for the entire semester. And he said, doesn't respect students' time. A line of us have been waiting outside his office for over an hour. He finally showed up and said, and the last shall be first, and started seeing us in reverse order. Made me late for my work study. Said, feels like a class for farmers. Hope you like talking about seeds, wheat seeds, mustard seeds, seeds. And then finally, 2 more. I asked him to sign my accommodations form for the Disability Service Office. He spit on the ground, rubbed dirt in my eyes, and I can see now, but it was still rude. Instructor is a drama queen. He stopped in the middle of a lecture to announce, one of you will betray me, right after I had told him that I was switching advisors. He straight up ghosted us. He took on the entire class of his advisees, got us all excited to work with him, then immediately left for 2,000-year sabbatical. Thanks for nothing. And finally, a complete joke. He only got the job because his dad is important. So humor is good for us in these days. We live in probably as perilous a time as we've been in a long time. We thought January 6th was about as perilous as we could get back a year or so ago. But things have gotten really crazy all of a sudden. And we're sitting on edge, waiting to see what happens. I want to commend you, by the way, for working with Afghan refugees. In Bloomington, we're doing the same. We certainly destroyed a country for a long time, spent an awful lot of money, and we owe the people a great deal of recompense. Wade's Peace by Judith Hill. Wade's peace with your breath, breathe in firemen and rubble, breathe out whole buildings and flocks of red-winged blackbirds. Breathe in terrorists and breathe out sleeping children and freshly mown fields. Breathe in confusion and breathe out maple trees. Breathe in the fallen and breathe out lifelong friendships intact. Wade's peace with your listening, hearing sirens, pray loud. Remember your tools, flower seeds, clothespins, clean rivers. Make soup, play music, learn the word for thank you in 3 languages, learn to knit and make a hat. Think of chaos as dancing raspberries. Imagine grief as the outbreath of beauty or the gesture of fish. Swim for the other side. Wage peace. Poem by Judith Hill. Give me my first slide over there, will you, John? Yogi Bear said the future ain't what it used to be. It surely ain't. And the second? When we walk, we are rushing. We print anxiety and sorrow on the earth. We have to walk in a way that we only print peace and serenity on the earth. Be aware of the contact between your feet and the earth. Walk as if you are kissing the earth with your feet. I want to say in this crazy time, we need to remember who we are as human beings. And we need to do our best not to go crazy. Not to be so anxiety-filled that we stomp the earth violently, that we walk in great anxiety. And that takes practice. It takes breathing. It takes intentionality. It takes walking as if our feet are kissing the earth. I spend a good deal, I'm fortunate enough to live in the forest, Glenda and I found a new book this past week. It's called The Overstory by Richard Powers, I believe. Powerful, powerful read. I thought I'd read it years ago, but ran into a man who asked me about it, and so I looked it up, and I actually haven't read it. I'm about 2/3 through it. I highly recommend it. It'll make you love trees like you've never loved trees before. It's a novel based really about real life in the Northwest. The lives of people who are trying to save the trees. Take some time to walk in trees. Take some time. Hug a tree. Really, you know, old tree huggers. People used to make fun of the tree huggers out there trying to stop the lumbering, the cutting of trees, especially the clear cutting of trees. But I tell you, a tree can do you a lot of good. We have a tree on our land. When we decided to build a lake back in 2014 and build a dam, we did have to cut some trees for the lake. We have 42 acres of trees, and for 20 years almost, or at least 15, 20 years, we thought about cutting or building a lake and having a source of water and so forth, but we couldn't do it because we couldn't cut trees. And I finally, on the year I took my grandson down to see the last shuttle launch, I taught him to swim, and came back and said, I want to build a dam. I want him to be able to come swim out here anytime he wants. And when we decided to do that, we spent the better part of 3 weeks weeping every night at the trees that were falling. It was probably some of the hardest nights of our marriage, I think. And that's been 50 some years. But, and seeing, it looked like a bomb had gone off in the middle of our property because we took down trees to make room for a lake. And I have another ridge that we just discovered when we decided to do this. I didn't realize our land went quite as far, and we found a ridge over there with a lot of trees, beautiful, large trees. And I took the timber crew, an Amish man, over to see those trees. And he walked up to this white oak, which is huge and straight to the sky, and he fell on his knees and hugged it. And he said, Bill, I've never cut a white oak this good. I don't know how much we'll give you for this. I said, well, it doesn't matter because we're not going to cut it. And they kept coming back. The man, the Amish who owned the sawmill down in Odin, was told about it, and he called, and they kept coming back and said, there are 16 trees over there, Bill, that'll pay you more money than all the trees we've cut for your lake, which was close to 200 trees. And I said, no, we're not going to cut those trees. He said, it's not the money, is it? I said, no. I said, I want people to come one of these days and walk up that tree and fall just like you did and hug it. I want them to listen to that tree. I want them to breathe into that tree. If you pay me money for it, the money's gone. The tree is gone. So I've learned a lot from trees since living in them for quite a while. As most of you know, Glenda and I spent 5 years with our teenage kids in a teepee in Brown County in the trees. And I think trees teach us that this earth has done well without human beings for many, 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 aeons. And one of the things that gives me comfort, really, to be honest with you, is it'll do well when we're gone. It really will. The earth would do very well without us. But at the same time, while we are here, the earth has a lot to teach us. If we'll turn off our television once in a while, and I've been hooked on the women's basketball tournament with IU and things like that. I enjoy television, but I also enjoy walking in nature. And if you don't do that once in a while, you tend to forget where your connections are. You don't remember, your feet don't remember where your connection is. You're connected to earth. You came from it and you will go back to it in a very short time, really. Walk as if your feet are kissing the earth. Give me another slide, will you? Mahmoud Darwish wrote, "The war will end, the leaders will shake hands, the old woman will keep waiting for her martyred son, the girl will wait for her beloved husband, and those children will wait for their heroic father," or mother, I would say. "I don't know who sold our homeland, but I saw who paid the price." I am a committed pacifist. I don't believe in war. I don't think war has ever solved anything. I don't think the Revolutionary War of the United States ever solved anything. I don't think war is ever the answer. And if it is the answer, we have yet to ask the right question. In a book called Why Civil Resistance Works, The Strategic Logic of Nonviolent Conflict, Harvard professor Erica Chenoweth explains why civil resistance campaigns attract more absolute numbers of people. Recent research suggests that nonviolent civil resistance is far more successful in creating broad-based change than violent campaigns are, a somewhat surprising find with a story behind it. When Professor Chenoweth started her pre-doctoral fellowship at the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs, she believed in the strategic logic of armed resistance. She had studied terrorism, civil war, major revolutions, Russian, French, Algerian, and American, and suspected that only violent force had achieved major social and political change. But when a workshop led her to consider proving that violent resistance was more successful than the nonviolent kind, since the question had never been addressed systematically, she and her colleague Mary Stefan began a research project. For the next 2 years, Chenoweth and Stefan collected data on all violent and nonviolent campaigns from 1900 to 2006 that resulted in the overthrow of a government or a territorial liberation. They created a data set of 323 mass actions, and Chenoweth analyzed at least 160 variables related to success, criteria, participant categories, state capacity, and more. The results turned her earlier paradigm on its head. In the aggregate, she's found, nonviolent civil resistance was far more effective in producing change and resulting in a more peaceful community. It's certainly true of our own country. We, as a child in high school or in grade school, we learned about the American Revolution and George Washington, how wonderful he was. But they didn't tell me about Shays' Rebellion. They didn't tell me about how farmers who had volunteered for Washington's army to liberate us from the King George, and then went back to their homes in New York and found that George had given their land to his rich friends, so they had nothing left. And they raised a rebellion. And George Washington put them down and ordered their own officers to execute many of them on sight. Violent revolution does nothing but revolve violence. It brings violence. Violence cannot bring peace, and violence never has. Chenoweth's works, I think, is a powerful piece. It's certainly not the ones. There's many older documents and books about nonviolence. And I remember, the other favorite human being, one of the other favorite human beings of mine is Mahatma Gandhi, and how he and the poor in India, he was opposed to nonviolence. Gandhi as a lawyer in South Africa and then in India. When he came home, Leo Tolstoy was trying to get him to use nonviolence. And Gandhi says, nonviolence won't work against the British Empire. It's the most brutal empire in the history of the world. Look at what it's done across the earth. Nonviolence won't work. Leo Tolstoy, in a book called The Kingdom of God is Within You, includes in there the 10 principles of nonviolence that were written by Ballou, a Universalist minister in Massachusetts in the 18th and 19th century. Leo got those 10 principles from Ballou's nephew, and he sent them and he sent his book, The Kingdom of God is Within You, to Gandhi. The last chapter of that book, Gandhi translated into Hindi and required all of his followers to take it to prison with him because it convinced Gandhi to use nonviolence. And one of the most powerful things in the Gandhi movie, and it's in his life story as well, in his biographies and so forth, is that a man came to him at the end, terribly mournful because he had killed another man, a Muslim. And Gandhi, he said, what could I do? I wanted to be nonviolent. I could not do it. I killed him. And he has 4 children, and they're left without a father. What should I do? Gandhi said, you must raise those children for him, not as a Hindu, which he was, but as a Muslim. Teach them to be good Muslims. Gandhi knew the secret of nonviolence, and I believe we have to relearn that with every generation, because every generation seems to have everybody who wants to call for violence. And violence just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. There's no evidence I can see that it does. And I think we have to, it costs a great deal. Nonviolence costs everything we have. But it is, I think, the strongest force in the world. That song that was I didn't really pick it as the opening song, the prelude. I was going to actually kind of sing it for you, but I'm glad I don't have to. Leonard Cohen's song, the Anthem. That song has the beauty of saying that the birds still sing. The chorus again and again says, ring the bells that still can ring, forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. That word, those words, there's a crack in everything, are the words from Ralph Waldo Emerson, actually, that Leonard Cohen picked out. There's a crack in everything. Nothing's perfect. But if we can learn to walk in such a way that our feet are kissing the earth, we can learn to have the courage to work nonviolently. As Gandhi said, it doesn't take courage to take a gun and kill a person you don't even know on the orders of someone else. It takes a courage to make your own life and your own death meaningful. That's courage. And we will praise, we have monuments all over this country to veterans of war. And I hold nothing. I come from a military family. I had brothers in the military. One brother from Nam. I have many friends who served in Nam. My best friend in high school died in Nam. He made his decisions. I do not denigrate that decision, but I denigrate a culture that worships war. a culture that worships war. What built this nation is not war. What built this nation is labor and people working together. And we have to find ways to get back to that. We have to find ways that says courage is not killing. Courage is living. Courage is loving. Have the courage to love. And Jesus, that so-called Messiah, said it very clearly. Love your enemies. Love your enemies. I named my son, we did, Glenda and I, after Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was executed by Hitler's orders just 10 days before the liberation of Flossenburg prison camp. He started the Confessing Church of Germany because all of Christendom had joined Adolf Hitler's pack. Much of Christendom this day in this country has joined the right-wing fascist white nationalist pack. And Bonhoeffer supported the resistance and was executed for that support. We need to find the courage to stand for peace, to stand against this warmongering world, and to stand against any politician that comes to tell me that we have to go to war. Any politician. It does not work. It has never worked, and it never will. I hope that we can find the courage to do that. And I also hope we can have, in our lives, we can have humor and joy. And if you're not laughing enough, find something to laugh about. Turn the television off. It's not going to change for you. It won't change quick enough for you. You can go out and take a walk and come back. You'll hear the same story again and again and again. And there's not saying much about what's going on in Ukraine right now. There is nonviolent resistance in Ukraine. There are Russian soldiers, if you read The Guardian and other sources, that are reporting not just on the gunfire and the shelling and so forth, which is terrible and awful, and it makes good headlines. But they don't tell you about the fact that the troops coming into some of those cities have deserted. They were told they were going on a training mission. They weren't told they were going to war. They don't tell you about the people who have gone out to offer food to them in their big tank column, offered food to them, and in doing so has convinced some of them to leave. And some farmers have even taken some soldiers back to the Russian border because they know the back roads. If you read the history of the Russian invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1967, there was a Czechoslovakia planned for a huge nonviolent resistance. They told all the people when the thing started happening, go out, take your street signs and change them, put them all over the place. So the Russians couldn't find who they was looking for. They didn't need the street signs. You know what street you live on and how to get there. So they moved all their street signs, and it totally confused the Russian army. They also encouraged people to go out and meet the soldiers and invite them to dinner. And the entire 1st Infantry of the Russian military had to be called back to Russia because so many of them refused to follow orders. Nonviolent resistance works, but it takes a lot of people. And it sometimes only takes one person doing it for many others to join. We got to run back to Bloomington today for a peace rally on the courthouse, which we've done so many times at the courthouse lawn. And sometimes you think, what difference does it make? But I remember the first time I did civil disobedience in Washington, D.C., Phil Berrigan had convinced me to practice nonviolence, and he said, the first time you get arrested, it'll be like shaking the demons from your soul. And when I went to court, they handed me a charge sheet. There was 75 of us who refused to allow anyone to pay our fines, and so we had to go to jail, to D.C. prison. But the clerk handed me my charge sheet as I went before the judge. And I looked at it, and the judge says, you know what you're being charged with? I said, yeah, I do. I said, you know who Phil Berrigan is? And he said, everybody knows who Phil Berrigan is. Phil, if you don't know, Phil and his 8 other compadres were the Catonsville Nine that started the anti-Vietnam War movement by burning several hundreds of draft cards in a Catonsville Nine in Catonsville, Maryland draft office. Burn it with homemade napalm and went to prison for it. The judge says, everybody knows who Phil Berrigan is. And I said, well, when Phil Berrigan convinced me to start practicing nonviolence, he told me that the first time I did it, it'd be like shaking the demons from my soul. And I said, on this charge sheet, it says illegal demon. It was bureaucratic short term for illegal demonstration. I said, illegal demon. And the judge just laughed. He said, Phil Berrigan knows what he's talking about. But as we were coming out of that Capitol Rotunda, it was the largest protest since the Vietnam War, and there was 200 and some of us arrested, and it took hours and hours to arrest us and haul us off in paddy wagons. And my twin brother and I, for some reason, they left us to last. I think it's because we had long hair and looked wild, and they thought we were crazy. But the rest of them were mostly Christians and in suits and ties and dresses. And as we came out, there was a huge crowd of people wanting to get in to see the Capitol, tourists. You know, they were all kind of aggravated that we'd stopped tourism for that day. But this one man, as I was getting on the paddy wagon, this one older fellow, he and his wife standing there, and he said, why are they arresting you? I said, because we were praying for peace in the Capitol. He said, if they're going to arrest you for praying for peace, they got to arrest me too. And he handed his camera to his wife and climbed on the paddy wagon just by himself. And that night in the lockup, we didn't have room to lay down. Half of us could lay down at a time, and we sang for hours, and half of us lay down for a couple hours and then stand up while the others sat. And when that man, he was a Pentecostal Christian. He'd been traveling around the country going to gospel sings, and he told the judge, last night was the greatest gospel sing I've ever been to in my life. Nonviolence is fun. And I tell you, we had a wonderful week in the D.C. prison, and when we got out of the prison, as they released us, the entire prison was singing, all we are saying is give peace a chance. So when you do work for peace, when you do things nonviolently, people hear you much more than they hear you when you're screaming and hollering and carrying on. Really, they hear what you're saying. Oftentimes in Bloomington, when I've been involved with protests and so forth, people want me to holler. I said, I don't need to holler. People know why I'm here. I need to be quiet. Silence is golden, but silence is loud. Silence speaks peace. I encourage you to seek peace. I encourage you to really don't let it take your happiness. As Bishop Tutu says, that's why we're here, is to be happy. If you're at peace, you can be happy. Walk as if your feet are kissing the earth. Let us stand in body and or spirit, and sing our closing hymn, number 168.
One more step, we will take one more step, till there is peace for us and everyone. We'll take one
Our closing words are from Khalil Gibran. It's entitled Fear. It is said that before entering the sea, a river trembles with fear. She looks back at the paths she has traveled from the peaks of the mountains, the long winding road crossing forests and villages. And in front of her, she sees an ocean so vast that to enter seems nothing more than to disappear forever. But there is no other way. The river cannot go back. Nobody can go back. To go back is impossible in existence. The river needs to take the risk of entering the ocean, because only then will fear disappear, because that's where the river will know it's not about disappearing into the ocean, but of becoming the ocean.
May the blessings of love rest upon you. May peace abide with you. May God's presence illuminate your heart now and forevermore.
Go in peace. Know that you are loved, that your life is sacred.